Okay, so here's where we're going to pop in this morning. This is Matthew chapter 12. Take a look. It says this. At that time, Jesus went through the grain fields on the Sabbath. His disciples were hungry and began to pick some heads of grain and eat them. When the Pharisees saw this, they said to him, "Look, your disciples are doing what is unlawful on the Sabbath." Jesus answered, "Haven't you read what David did when he and his companions were hungry? He entered the house of God, and he and his companions ate the consecrated bread, which was not lawful for them to do, but only for the priests. Or haven't you read in the law that the priests on Sabbath duty in the temple, they desecrate the Sabbath and yet are innocent?" Now, friends, imagine this scene for a moment. Okay, Jesus' disciples, they're walking through the grain fields. And all of a sudden, the religious leaders who have been trying to catch Jesus and his disciples doing something wrong, they come out of nowhere, like, "Why are you hanging out by the grain fields?" They come out of nowhere and they say, "Aha, Jesus, look, our laws say that you can't do anything on the Sabbath, and yet here are your disciples, and they're picking heads of grain and they're eating them. I mean, don't you know that that is against the laws of the Sabbath?" You can imagine them feeling all high and mighty. "We finally got you." And then you can imagine Jesus sort of calmly being like, "Hey guys, you study scripture, right? You remember that one time when David and his men, they were hungry and they actually went into the temple. They ate the consecrated bread that they were not allowed to eat. It was not lawful to do. You remember that story? Hey guys, you also remember that every Sabbath, the priests who are making the sacrifices and they're moving things, they're working. Right? They're breaking the laws of the Sabbath. So Pharisees, here's my question. Why are you so concerned about what my disciples are doing?" Now, friends, if you think the Pharisees are ticked off by what Jesus just said, wait until you see what he says next. Okay, verse 6, he says, "I tell you that something greater than the temple is here." Now, friends, today, 2,000 years after this is sort of lost on us today. But back then, what Jesus just said was an incredibly big deal. You see, back then, you can imagine the Pharisees almost standing back, sort of looking aghast, their mouths open, thinking, "Wait a second, how could you say that you're greater than the temple? That doesn't make any sense. I mean, that's not just crazy, that's blasphemy. Greater than the temple, how could you even say such a thing?" You see, in first century Judaism, the temple was the greatest place in the world. There was nothing greater than the temple in Jerusalem because that was the place where God dwelled. In fact, if you even wanted to get close to the presence of God, you had to go to the temple. But you see, what the Pharisees were starting to piece together here is that the only thing greater than the temple is the one who dwells in the temple, which is God. And Jesus is saying that if he's greater than the temple, then he's also saying that he's who? That he's God. Now, friends, don't miss this point. Jesus is saying this to them standing in the grain fields. In other words, he is not in the temple. He is not in the place where God dwells. Which means that if Jesus is God, then God no longer dwells in the temple, but rather he dwells amongst the people. And check this out. For the Pharisees in that moment, God was standing right next to them.